It wasn't until Lucia stepped into the streets, with Matteo's hot little palm gripped in her own, that she noticed the leaflets. Squares of paper spattered the cobblestones like wind-swept petals. One, caught in a breath of air, still drifted. She shaded her eyes and studied the strip of sky between buildings. Allied planes must have flown over Rome, dropping their propaganda. But when? Could she have slept so hard last night, with Matteo curled in her arms, that the sirens failed to wake her? Of course, air raid sirens failed to rouse most Romans these days. They were used to planes passing over, destined for some other populace. Rome was the eternal city, home to the Pope. It would never be bombed. She glanced at Matteo, who tugged on her arm so he could snatch up a leaflet. His cheeks were red, his eyes still bright with fading tears. Moments earlier, Lucia had mentioned, unwisely, that he had an appointment with the pediatrician after errands. Matteo had sat down on the stairs, refusing to budge. She'd insisted and then pleaded with him. Their cupboards were empty, and the lines for bread and eggs and flour would stretch with the morning. Eventually, she carried him down the steps and through the door. And now here they were, already exhausted. "Mama, what does it say?" She plucked the leaflet from his fingers. "Did you hear sirens last night, Matteo?" She scanned the printing on the square of paper. He shook his head, sniffing. The final sentence rose from the text and hung for an uncomfortable moment in Lucia's mind. "Italians shall die for Mussolini and Hitler, or live for Italy and for civilization." She frowned. "Never mind," she murmured, dropping the leaflet and squeezing Matteo's hand, prompting him to match her stride. The sun was barely up over Rome's rooftops, but her lower back trickled sweat. With her free hand, she adjusted the itchy waistband of her skirt and gathered the hair off her neck, a handful of black curls, savoring the air on her skin. Die for Mussolini. That's exactly what she, and especially her brothers, had been raised to do. Matteo skipped along in his short pants, his arm yanking on hers as he hopped at random intervals, playing a game with the cobblestones. The message on the leaflet wasn't new. Just the other night, Churchill had slipped through some gap in the state-controlled radio, imploring Italy's people to shake off the yoke of fascism and secure a separate peace. Lucia puffed air through her lips. Right now, she was more concerned with securing bread. "Think we'll get some eggs today, Piccolo?" He looked up at her and shrugged, blinking under his fringe of curls. He matched her completely. A lighter version of her, with his thick hair, not colored eyes, and double dimples. "We need at least 4 eggs," she said, composing a mental list. "And perhaps we'll find a fish for supper. What do you think, Matteo? Will we be lucky today?" He wiped his freckled nose. "You have cigarettes for the man?" She laughed. "Yes, for the fisherman." She did have some, saved from her rations, but who knew if she'd catch someone along the Tiber who would make a deal. They rounded a corner onto a wider street, and Signora Bruno, sweeping her front steps, glanced up. A stripe of sunlight fell over the stoop, brightening the old woman's hair. She was nearly always outside, either pruning the bougainvillea that swept over her ground-floor apartment, or feeding stray cats, or propped in a chair to watch the world trot by. "Buongiorno, Lucia. Why are you out so early?" Flowers fluttered over Noemi Bruno's head like butterflies. Matteo dropped Lucia's hand and ran to the elderly neighbor, thumping against her belly. He wrapped his arms around her waist, and her arthritic hands patted his back. Lucia followed suit, kissing both of Noemi's papery cheeks before answering her question. "Just trying to get some shopping done before an appointment." She glanced at a pile of leaflets stacked neatly on her neighbor's step, I see you too heard from the enemy last night. Noemi shrugged. I don't know who the enemy is anymore, cara mia. But by the look of it, they dropped their entire bundle on our neighborhood. The old woman laughed, the map of her face transforming. Lucia smiled, but her chest tightened like a fist. Nobody seemed to know who the enemy was anymore. Her father, a fascist official, and her mother, German by birth, were steadfast. Their rhetoric against the Allies was like a wall. Every time a plane passed over Rome, they added another brick. But in the streets, there she heard everything. People whispered in cafes, hoping for a coup d'etat and peace with the Allies. Anti-fascists plastered posters on walls and ran. People blamed the air raids on Mussolini himself, whispering that if he hadn't sided with Hitler, if he'd stayed out of the war, their sons and cities would be safe. Noemi fingered her silvery bun. I, for one, think we should break with Germany and stop fighting the Allies. The minute they landed in Sicily, Il Duce lost his war. Lucia hitched her shopping bag up on her elbow. With the Allies pushing into Italy on one side and the Germans on the other, wasn't every path a gamble? She opened her mouth to say so, but stopped mid-breath. Because what did she know? Her mother's voice murmured in her thoughts. Leave opinions to the men.